Test. Test. All right, folks, we're going to get started in a couple of minutes. But before we do, if I could have any members of the Coalition of Graduate Workers Organizing Committee, if you could come up and congregate over here for a sec, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
What you're expecting to hear, like
something about a union, maybe, but yeah. I don't want my name in the paper.
Got it. I'm just trying to get a feel for it. I'm not quoting.
Right.
Something about union. Shit.
Your tripod stance is driving me nuts. It's not even close. It's not even close to level. But I noticed when you turned it, it's starting to rotate sideways. Just not telling you how to do your job. This is what I'm paying attention to, not actually what's going on.
Oh yeah, I know.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. So, it's been an interesting week. In this past week, we have seen, especially yesterday, we have seen things happen at this university that I definitely know that I didn't expect to see happen as of August. Probably didn't expect to see happen as of last Sunday. We've seen tremendous shakeups in the very top levels of our university with the resignation of President Tim Wolf and the announcement that Chancellor Bowen Lofton will be transitioning into a new role within the university and will no longer serve as Chancellor as of the first of this year. Now, one of the things that we have to keep in mind as we're going forward here is that these actions have shown the incredible power of our university community. It has shown that that collective action can achieve incredible results. But what we cannot, the lesson that we cannot take from this, that we cannot leave this moment with, is that we are done. Is that we are finished, and that just because we got two very highly paid college executives to leave their jobs does not mean that we have won a lasting victory. Because if today is the last time that we are all gathered together in this spirit of celebration, in this spirit of victory, then it is not a victory at all. The point is that we have to stay united. The point is that we have to realize that there's tremendous work left to do. What we have to realize is that just because two old white dudes are gone does not mean that the entire system that exploits people of color, that exploits women, that exploits graduate labor, that exploits non-tenure track labor, that does not show common decency and humanity to people of different gender identities, that doesn't show solidarity with our gay and lesbian community. That as long as all of those problems are still there, a few personnel changes does not change the fundamental problems of this university. So we have reason to be happy. We have reason to celebrate. But we also have reason to understand that tomorrow we need to wake up and we need to keep working. And I just want to say, history, I think, is often dictated by the most unlikely things. I don't know how many people remember this, but at the very beginning of what would become the Forum on Graduate Rights, of what would become this movement that we see gathered in Traditions Plaza today, it was a Facebook event called Insurance Party. It was set up with the intention that like a dozen sociology students would show up. And you know, as we were having those initial meetings, figuring out what this was and what it was going to become, it soon became apparent that we could no longer just call ourselves Insurance Party. It turns out that that name, while great for the initial thought of what this would be, was not appropriate to the larger mission. And so there were questions that we were asking ourselves in those initial meetings, like, what should we call this? Is this the Forum on Graduate Health Insurance? Is this, you know, the forum on graduate compensation? And it was, I believe, Kenneth Bryant Jr., president of GSA, who said, no, we got to call this the Forum on Graduate Rights. This has to be bigger than just health insurance. It has to be bigger than this one immediate issue. And that's another thing we have to keep in mind, that as we go forward, we have to recognize that one of the greatest dangers is having our various issues balkanized into only affecting certain facets of us. So that then, if there's an injustice against an African-American graduate student, we think, oh, that is a black activist issue. African-American graduate students are graduate students. Their rights are our rights. As the old saying goes, an injustice to one is an injustice to all. And that is a credo that we have to live by. And so as we move forward, today and each day that follows after this, we have to remember to stick up for one another, to not let ourselves fall into the trap of thinking, oh, that doesn't affect me. You know, I am not a person of color. I am not a gay person. I am not, speaking to our tenured friends and allies, I am not contingent labor. We have to remember all of those things, and we have to work with each other, for each other, today and for every day to come. When we had our first rally in August, that was the first week of class. We had been talking about it for weeks beforehand, and we still were not sure how big of a success it would be. And I can't tell you, as someone who has been in this, who was in that first meeting to plan the insurance party, I can't tell you how much it means to me to look out and see this many people coming here in the middle of the semester, right when I know me personally, that we're all just crushed by other things we could be doing at this moment. It means so much to me, and it means so much to everyone on the steering committee of the Forum of Graduate Rights. To see you all here, to see you all willing to stick up for your fellow students, and willing to have these hard conversations that are facing us now. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm so appreciative. Okay, so what we're going to do today, we have a number of speakers set up. The first of which is Professor April Langley from the English department. So I'd like to turn the mic over to her at this time, and then we will have several more speakers, and then at the end we will have one final action of solidarity. So, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. April Langley.
Wow. So I'm not a get in front of people kind of thing, but behind the scenes. But I'm proud. I'm proud, probably for the first time in nearly 15 years, to be here at MU as faculty. I've got notes because I'm an English professor. And I'm also a Black Studies professor. And I'm also a Black... Afro-Latin tenured professor here at the University of Missouri. And here's what I think. They came for the graduate students' benefits. We responded. They came for Planned Parenthood and the rights of women and poor people.
What?
And we responded. They've been coming for our trans and our LGBT and our gendered and differently able, and we're responding.
I'm looking at that right now.
They've been coming for our families. Yes, because we're not family friendly, and we responded.
Oh wait, hold on. You got me
we're here now in this moment, and I'm going to go to my notes. These circumstances we find ourselves in, confronting today, which didn't even begin today, or even with this series of tragic events. I won't call them incidents because they're not incidental. Students have been responding. Students, graduate students, undergraduate students, have been responding to overt and covert manifestations of a hostile environment for a long time, long before I came here, long before the Cotton Ball event, long before MU for Mike Brown, long before, I can't even name all the issues, and I won't belittle them by trying to enumerate them, because many of the news media, they've been asking, well, give us examples, give us examples. It's too numerous to rehearse here. We can all read, write, and think, and we have internet. The important takeaway from what we're seeing at MU today is that students want leadership that not only understands or empathizes with their issues, all of our students' issues, without regard to their mode of being, but administration at the highest level that is responsive. And let me pause here to say, there's a difference between being responsive and reactionary. It seems to me that students, faculty, and staff, from the top to the bottom, desire that their issues be at the forefront of a system-wide structures and critical decisions, ensuring that differently able, trans, cis communities, families, veterans of all races, nationalities, cultural modes of being are more than an afterthought. We should not have to come to this point, a hunger strike where a brilliant young graduate scholar who should be engaging in research is literally starving, or student athletes coping with the demands of scholarship and athleticism in the strengthening and preparation of their minds and bodies and spirits, or our students who are engaging in coursework, papers, exams, part-time, full-time jobs, volunteering in food banks, many of whom are away from home teaching our classes, national and international. They should not have to be dealing with this shit. And so, losing all, risking all. I heard today, and I've heard several times, the phrase, what is the difference? The question, what is the difference between a moment and a movement? And the response is sacrifice, and we've all been sacrificing. So now that we're here, and now that we have sacrificed to get to this point and all these drastic measures, just to be heard, just to be valued, just to be given an opportunity to work with a new administration to build an environment of inclusivity, value, trust, and equity, it's incumbent upon us to pull up our sleeves and work to build a new MU, because the odor from the office at Jesse to the classroom to the basement is foul. And now's the time to do the work of cleaning and pulling and digging up those roots. And that takes all of us, all of us. So I want to just say respect to my graduate students. I want to say respect to my community. And I want to thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Langley. All right, next I'd like to call up to speak Sarah Senf. She is a PhD student in the theater department.
Hello! I just want to say how very pleased I am to see you all here today, how very moved I have been to see what began as hatred creating a moment of coalition, a moment of solidarity where people are banding together to create change. On his way out, President Lofton in his, President Wolf, conflating people here. President Wolf said that this is not the way you create change, and that we stopped listening to one another. But I think we all know who stopped listening. I think we all know who sent email after email and tweet after tweet, who staged sit-in after sit-in and die-in after die-in, who sat in Jesse Hall, who marched through campus, who pleaded for an ear at every opportunity. And so when administration stopped listening, yes, we shouted. And quite obviously, that is the way we're creating change. As a graduate student, as an instructor, as a graduate student employee who has students of marginalized groups in my classroom, I cannot say how proud I am of their responses, how proud I am of the football players who are my current and former students who have stepped up. And I feel like as graduate students, we are in a unique position to continue the labor and create change on this campus. We have the opportunity to design courses where scholars of color, queer scholars, disabled scholars are represented in our syllabi, where we make room for these voices in our classrooms so that every student who comes to my classroom, my disabled students, my queer students, my students of color, every marginalized group on campus is welcomed and valued, not just tolerated. We as a collective, all of the social justice groups on campus, Concerned Student 1950, LBC, all of these groups have been working together to create change. And now we need to push our departments to put their money where their mouth is, to recruit candidates of color, staff, faculty, grad students. To recruit these people to be our psychologists in our counseling center. To recruit people to make sure that the University of Missouri reflects the state of Missouri in its composition. This week has been a week of responsiveness, where people have been acting very quickly as events change and unfold very quickly. And thank you for that. I feel like the campus is electrified, fraught, and hopeful all at the same time. But I do want to mention to the people who believe that this is just a series of isolated incidents, it's just a couple of people who should be ignored because clearly racism is just a one-off thing. The backlash that this campus is currently experiencing is evidence of the reason why we showed up to begin with. ally on the periphery of the movement happening in the last week, have experienced a horrific number of racist tweets. I have had the swastika drawn in feces tweeted at me. I have had the idea that I'm a race traitor because I stand up for my marginalized brothers and sisters tweeted at me. So I cannot imagine what it's like for me to be receiving this. I can't imagine what it's like to be a student of color on this campus, dealing with that this week. And I feel like all of the hatred that we're getting right now, all of the backlash, all of that is evidence that we're doing something right and we've got to continue. I have been receiving Facebook messages and tweets and emails from people all over the country, all over the world, from Russia, from London, from South Africa, from Australia, people from national conferences in my field saying, we wish you were here so that you could talk about what's happening at your university. People are paying attention, individuals, scholars. The entire world is looking at what is happening at Mizzou right now. So we've got to step up, we've got to continue the fight, we cannot stop. So I'm going to repeat what Patty Quackenbush said at our first rally in the first week of school. We got to snuggle in the struggle, y'all. Love on one another, band together, and we can do this.
All right, folks, just to give you a quick break from Eric, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is Tim Love. He's a doctoral student in the Department of English, so please welcome him here.
Thanks, Connor. Thank you, everyone. I am one of 2 black male graduate students in the English department. I am proud of where I am. I'm proud of what I do. Okay, but I'm not proud of what has been going on here on campus. But, you know, we have, this is just the start, as Eric said. This is just the beginning. We have a long road ahead of us. We have a long fight ahead of us. At the same time, we should not have this fight. We should not have this war. In the 21st century, we should not still be fighting against racism. Okay, so we have evolved in various areas. We have evolved in engineering. We have evolved in science. We have evolved in space and exploration. But socially, we are de-evolving. Socially, we are taking steps back. So, what can we do? Where do we start? Here, what can we do now? We must start here at Mizzou, at the academic level. We must formulate courses, mandatory courses that address racist mentalities, that address racial injustice, racial issues that our undergraduates can take to basically curb the certain feelings, certain pervasive feelings that have been rampant. Okay, so on the campus of UC Berkeley, where I graduated from, at UC Berkeley, all students are required to take at least one course on racial injustice and gender inequality. So I propose that we do the same thing here. must make an interdisciplinary, bipartisan effort to address racial injustice, to elevate compassion and empathy. Compassion and empathy should be a part of our curriculums. Now, okay, so I'm not asking us to turn our students into kumbaya liberals or anything like that. Compassion and empathy are not necessarily religious, political problems. Compassion and empathy are human, they are not religious or political things. They are actually human things. Okay? So we should take this into account. So I want to read a letter here, a letter of solidarity that I wrote for the EGSA, for the English Graduate Student Association, and I wrote it Sunday night before Tim Wolf actually resigned. But I still feel that it is very, very relevant. On November 6, 2015, African American students asked Tim Wolf, president of the University of Missouri at the time, to define systematic oppression. He responded, "Systematic oppression is because you don't believe that you have the equal opportunity for success." In a strange reversal of academic roles, students posed a basic question to an educator only to receive a rather wrong and highly offensive answer. President Wolf's words are indicative of a larger problem. Not only does it explain his lack of immediate action in response to racial incidents on campus, but it reveals a kind of leadership that fails to acknowledge a factual, pervasive disease. Systematic oppression exists. Systemic racism exists. They exist in America and on campus. No matter how conservative some perspectives may be on the issue, we cannot pretend that racial slurs are non-existent, or that swastikas made of feces are not real. If the fruits of systematic racism are these, and Wolf knows that they subsist on campus, then his response to African American students that night, his apparent unwillingness to define such a phrase, is a racial slur in itself. We cannot tolerate this, not from Wolf or anyone else that assumes the role of administrator, of educator, or instructor. Wolf's adamant refusal to define the term systematic oppression by placing the blame on historically oppressed individuals exposes an uncompassionate mentality and undermines the academic integrity of the institution for which he served. President Wolf purposely gave his students the wrong answer, and he did it in the spirit of prejudice. In institutions of higher education, of all places, instructors should not alter academia at the expense of opinionated racial prejudice. Saying that systematic oppression is the fault of blacks, while quite abrasively referring to blacks as you, is a form of philosophical discrimination. It fuels the formulation of directives that prevent African Americans from receiving remedy from a quite visible problem. Thus, even if an administrator or instructor does not agree with the appropriation of terms like systematic or systemic racism, refusing to properly define it discloses a conglomerate of prejudicial motivations. Within weeks of arriving from California to Missouri, I met an individual who had worked for the University of Missouri for many years. Without hesitation, she told me, among other racist things, that 70% of all black children are illegitimate. This longtime employee of Missouri thought it was okay to say this to me. She even smiled as she relayed these disgusting, unfounded words. We can only blame a persistent climate of racism for remarks such as these. We can only blame a system that does not immediately react to racial injustices. We can only blame ourselves for not getting involved. President Wolf's comment serves as a microcosm for pervasive attitudes which undermine human civility and dignity. Activists like Jonathan Butler have risked their lives to fight for this sense of dignity. He admirably struggled for the cause of others. We should do the same. Whether the cause primarily affects African Americans, or gays, or homosexuals, or the LGBT community, or women. As long as racial discrimination and inequality threatens the fiber of basic societal compassion and academic liberty, we must fight against it as a human cause. I have remained silent for too long. We have remained silent for too long. As a graduate student in the Department of English, I fully support the protests of Jonathan Butler, the Mizzou football players, and activists of Concerned Student 1950. Sincerely, Timothy Love, Graduate Fellow of English Literature. Thank you very much.
Okay, next, I'd like to invite up the other half of the two-headed monster that is me. The co-chair of the Coalition of Graduate Workers, Connor Lewis, who is going to speak about how a lot of the things we've been working through in the past week also relate to labor issues. So, Connor.
How's it going, folks? I think that one of the things that's been clearly demonstrated over the past semester is that struggles against injustice are common struggles, and that the common struggle between activists struggling against racism, fighting against systemic racism on this campus, is intimately linked to the struggle of graduate students that are fighting for better working conditions, that are fighting for dignified work. And this is, speaking as a historian, historically true. Struggles for equity and against injustice permeate all social movements. They permeate the labor movement, the civil rights movement, the gay rights movement. They permeate these movements that are fighting for a better country, for a better community, for a better state, and a better society. And I think that a union here at the University of Missouri, and unions in general, can be positive forces for social change. A contract is important. A contract gives us security, and it gives us the ability to know what we're going to be paid next year, to know that we have secure health insurance, that we have child care, that we have maternity leave, that we have paternity leave. We know what our working conditions are like, and we have a voice in setting them. But it's not just about a contract. It's about a more equitable campus community. It's about a more diverse faculty, about a more diverse student body, and that includes graduate students as well as undergraduate students. And we can have a voice in that. And a union can continue to work in solidarity with activists on campus working on a myriad number of issues. Working against racism for a more equitable campus, providing resources to the LGBT community, providing resources to women in low-income families, both here and in our community. And for a union to be meaningful, it needs to have a voice on all of those issues. It can't just be about securing a contract. It needs mobilized members. It needs members that care about their community, care about their fellow graduate students, about their faculty, about the staff here at the University of Missouri, like the members of Leona 773 who are currently fighting against the University of Missouri system for a better contract. I don't have roots in activism. This isn't something I've been doing my whole life. This is something that I was pushed to do by the events here at the university this semester, and it's something that I'm happy and committed to doing. And I think that for every one of us, the time to stand and keep fighting is now. We cannot let the departure of 2 administrators make us think that reforms are going to come from on high. We need to know that our collective voice, our collective action, will enact those changes. And so we need to keep fighting for a union. We need to keep fighting for a more racially just and diverse campus. We need to keep fighting for diversity and justice and an end to inequality on this campus. It was mentioned earlier that an injury to one is an injury to all. And this is something that I personally firmly believe. And it's something that the labor movement in the United States of America has believed since its founding in the 19th century. The Knights of Labor said exactly that. And unions subsequently have echoed exactly that. That it isn't just about individuals. It's about the collective. It's about the group. It's about society. It's about community. And I think that what we need to keep in mind moving forward is that the tide is turning. We can see it turning. We can see it turning in the events of the past week. We can see it turning in the events of yesterday. And I think what we have to keep our eyes fixed on is that we know that while the tide is turning, joy comes in the morning. Thank you.
All right, and it is my pleasure to introduce our final speaker for this rally, Maxwell Little, who is a graduate student in educational leadership and policy analysis and has also been involved in all kinds of activism on this campus. We're really happy to have him. Maxwell?
First and foremost, as an original member of Concerned Student 1950, we want to say that we appreciate the grass rights movement and the support of marginalized students on this community and against racial inequality. So give yourselves a hand, and we appreciate the allyship. I won't be before you long because I'm not the rallying type. That's Jonathan Butler style. But what I want to say is that right now we have something unique. We have unity. And that is rare, especially when you consider race and class. So we must continue this unity and continue our unified voice for justice and equality for all students on this campus. Not just students of color, not just students who have different sexual identities, but we have to take into account students who have disabilities. Their voices are often silent. But what I want to say is that, wow, really blowing the mic off. Concerned Student 1950 are advocating for shared governance, not just on our campus, but on all campuses. We believe that our voices have been silenced for too long, and we want our voices to be heard in all spaces, not just the classroom, where they often are silent, because there may be one or two of us, not at a football game, but we want our voices heard in all spaces in the decision-making process, just like all of you. So I want to say, as the higher-ups put the pressure on all of us, because they will, because they see our unified voice, and they don't like that. Trust me, I know. So let's keep this unified voice and this movement going. So when I say Ashe, you say power. Ashe! 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 Let's get up.
Right now, we don't have a contract. We did not reach a contract or an agreement with the university over wages. They forced merit pay on us after 40 years of negotiating our raises. So now I understand completely what systematic oppression is. They take it away, they tell you what to do, they're going to give you merit pay, and we base it on your performance and tell you if you don't do it the way we say you do it, you don't get raises. That's not fair. So I ask that you guys just stand with us as we stood with you and continue this fight.
Yeah!
All right, so that brings us to the end of this rally. But before we go, a few things that I want you all to keep in mind. First off, at the beginning of this rally, I asked for the members of the Coalition of Graduate Workers Organizing Committee to come up and get cards. If you have not yet had the talk with someone from the organizing committee about unionization, if you have questions about what that means for us and how that impacts our mission and how the union supports social justice, then we want you to ask those questions of us. And we want you, frankly, to sign those cards. All right, so please get in contact with members of the organizing committee if you have questions about that. As our final thing that we're doing today, we're going to have a march to the columns. We're going to march through Jesse. And in recognition of the fact that there has been an incredible amount of sacrifice put forth by students and faculty and staff throughout this entire past week and this entire semester, in commemoration of all that everyone here has done, we're going to ask that this be a solemn march. So we're going to march in sort of a silent protest through Jesse Hall. We're just going to stream through, make ourselves known, make ourselves heard, ironically by not talking. All right, so with that said, we will pass out through the two different entrances to Traditions Plaza, and we will reconvene in one line, and we will march straight through Jesse. So thank you all for coming. Again, extremely grateful to see this turnout today. And don't forget, We still have so much left to do. We cannot get complacent. All right, everyone, let's go to work!
You got it?